And he's in the way. My wife had a little kid, and it was uncomfortable all the way around. Anyhow, I had to do something, so I helped him get a job. He got a job at first at one place, and it didn't work out too good. Of course, it was because my brother wasn't handy at anything. You know, he could work, but he just didn't stay at it long enough. Most of the time, he'd stop and question why he's had to do that. And he worked there, and that didn't work out. And then he got a job at SOS, you know, where they make the soap pads and stuff like that. And he was working in the shipping department there. And he didn't last 2 months there. You know, they had all of them they could handle. Of course, that meant he'd be unemployed again. And I had worked at Nabisco, and I knew that was the largest bakery in the world, and they had, you know, probably thousands of people working there. It was a huge place, and I had worked there for a short period of time. And a lot of the people that worked there, their first language was not English. You know, they had came here from Ireland and Italy and Poland and places like that. And a lot of the people there were foreign born or first generation. And so when a white boy that had a high school education, could speak English fairly well, applied for a job, they usually would select him and put him on the payroll. And I knew that because I had worked there, and I was like 15 or 16 years old when I started to work there. So anyhow, I took him down there and took him in the personnel department, got him a job, and he went to work as a mixer's helper. And it wasn't that bad for him. I mean, he was mixing dough, and you know, there was a mixer, a guy that run the big mixer that they mix the premium saltines and pretzel crackers, all that stuff. You know, you mix the dough up. You're upstairs, and then when you get a big batch of dough, and then you dump it, and it goes downstairs in the ovens, and it bakes and all that. And the mixer's helper, mostly what he does is he takes, you know, 100-pound bags of flour and meal or whatever you're cooking with, and he cuts them open, puts them in the mixer, and then he turns the mixer on and adds water to it and that sort of thing. And that wasn't that complicated for my brother. And he knew he had to work, so he kind of stayed with that, and he thrived at it. So it turned out to be a good thing. As a matter of fact, he worked in that bakery, Nabisco Bakery. He worked there for 35 years now. I have to say that the people at Nabisco, and of course they went through 3 ownerships during that period of time. I think the tobacco company owned them, and Nabisco owned them, and then some other company owned them. But he had his problems there from time to time, but those people were pretty forgiving of him. And he's around the holidays every year, he would wind up in the hospital because I guess people who have emotional problems may get depressed around holidays. I don't know. Some people said that, but I would usually know that, you know, between Christmas and Thanksgiving and Christmas, he would probably wind up, you know, doing some time in the mental hospital. And it'd be my responsibility to kind of get him checked in, and he'd do at least 30 days because that was kind of the way they did it back then. You had to stay in there 30 days till they got your medicine all regulated and everything, then you get out. But Nabisco was pretty good. They didn't fire him or anything. He'd just be on medical leave, and once he'd get out, he'd go back to work. And as long as he stayed on his medication, he could function fairly normal. Now his outside life was a little bit different. he had an apartment or sleeping room, whatever. Sometimes it was apartment, sometimes his sleeping room. And he managed to get by on his own. I would go there every week, one day at lunchtime. Now, he'd be at work, and one day at lunchtime I would go there, and I had a box set up for his medication, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I would put his medications in that box. And as long as he took that medication as I put it in that box, he would be fine. But when he would get out of sorts, I could go over and check that box, and I could see he's not taking his medication the way he's supposed to. And sometimes he would have to go back to the hospital. I remember one time he was in St. Luke's, Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital, and it was the holidays. It was Christmas time, and it was down right off of the interstate, downtown Chicago. And they had told me they thought he was ready to get out. He'd done his time and thought he'd be able to go back to work. So I went down to the hospital. I'd go there once a week anyhow and see him. I went down there and I got him, got all his gear, and put him in my car and was driving him down I-55. Going to take him back to my house for a couple of days before it was a holiday time, before he had to go back to work. And we're going down I-55, and he puts on a pair of sunglasses, and then he puts on another pair of sunglasses over the top of those sunglasses. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he's giving me this story about he has to protect himself from the foreign things, and they'll damage his eyes, and he's giving me this whole story. And I reached over, I rolled the window down on my car. I reached over and took both sets of those sunglasses off his face and threw them out the window. And he had a dying duck fit. So as soon as I got to the next exit, I turned around, and he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I'm going to have to take you back down there because you ain't ready to go home." And I took him back to the hospital, and I checked him back in. I said, he ain't ripe yet. He's got to stay here for a while longer." They put him back on the psych ward at Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital was on the 13th floor, and they was kind of peculiar about that because when you go up the elevator, there was a 12th floor. There was 11 and 12 and 14. There was no 13. You had to know what button to push to get off on the 13th floor, which is kind of unusual. I thought that was kind of funny. But while he was in that hospital, he was out in the hallway one day, and he decided to jump out the window from the 13th floor. And he got a running start, and he ran down the hallway, and there was a big high glass window at the end of that hallway, and he took a flying leap at that glass, and he hit that and just fell to the floor because it was reinforced, and it was kind of like a cartoon.
He was there on the 13th floor when Sarah was born in St. Luke's.
Yeah. And of course they put him back in his room and locked him in and all that. They would get his medication. He took some pretty harsh medicine, He'd take Thorazine, that was awful stuff, and Metaril, and I don't know what all kinds of medication, but I would have to prepare it for him and get it fixed up. And once he would get it, get him leveled out, so he wouldn't be talking to the moon and all that stuff. And then I could take him home, and he'd go back to work, and he'd be pretty good as long as he took that medication. He might go, the whole 10, 11 months. But, come around Thanksgiving time, you can get prepared for it because he's going to have some kind of a problem. And he was kind of a prejudiced guy. He said nasty things to black people, and it didn't matter how many times you tell him not to do that. He just would do it. I mean, he would blurt it out. And I remember one time, he didn't ever drive or anything. He rode his public transportation. And in the city of Chicago, they have the CTA, Chicago Transit Authority, and then they have the trains and all of that. And the public transportation in Chicago at that time, and it may still be, was very, very good. I mean, you could travel 25 miles in one direction on public transportation without even having to change. You know, because the city was so big, you could go from the north side to the south side, you could go from the east side to the west side. And if you need to change, all you had to do is get a transfer from the bus driver when you got on the bus, and you could ride all day long for one fare. And he used that quite a bit. And of course, he was really good on public transportation. But one day he was on the bus, and there was some young black kid on there. And when I say kid, I mean he was probably 18, 19, 20 years old. And it was hot, and those buses weren't air conditioned. He had the window down, and he mouthed off to that black young man, and the black young man didn't do anything to him right then. But my brother was sitting there by the window, and then when the black kid got off the bus, he waited till the bus started to pull away, and then he walked over to the side of the bus, and he popped my brother in the mouth one time.
Right through the window?
Yeah. And of course, my brother wanted to get off the bus, but the bus is pulled away already. Probably a good thing, because my brother probably wouldn't down to won that fight. But that was one of the things, that I could share with you. There's a lot of other things that I can't, but one time he would go downtown a lot, because he'd go to movies downtown, and he would eat downtown. He just liked that big city, downtown. And I never, of course, he'd ride public transportation. He didn't have to worry about parking. The crowds didn't bother. One time he went to the Greyhound bus station to use the bathroom. And he was standing there using the bathroom in the bus station, and a black kid came up behind him and jerked his wallet out of his pocket and ran out the door with it. And of course, my brother was, at that time, was still really quick and could run fast. And he ran that kid down. That kid ran down the street, my brother after him. People all watching, because, it was always crowded downtown anyhow. And the kid ran up an alley, and my brother tackled him in that alley. And he pounded on him a little bit, and the kid was yelling for somebody to call the police. He figured the police was less of the evils, He'd be better off if the police come at least to get that big brother about off of it. But my brother got his wallet back and went on about his business and didn't wait for the police to come. That was kind of the way